Welcome to FCDC. This is a place where founders, creators, designers, and collaborators share their experience in taking a dream and making it a reality. So our guest today is Renee Gittins, CEO and creative director at Stumbling Cat, a Seattle-based indie video game company with a new product set to launch next week on Steam, titled Potions: Curious Tale, which is a refreshing take on the adventure game genre. I think you should all check it out. And we are going to ask Renee some questions. So, hello, Renee. You want to introduce
Hi.
yourself real quick?
Yeah, I think you did a wonderful job. My name's Renee Gittins. I've been in the games industry for just over a decade. Um, I've been working on this project for most of that last decade, actually, but I've also worked as the general manager of Phoenix Labs, Vancouver. I've been the executive director of the IGDA, and I've worked across software, executive management, production, marketing, almost anything you can shake a stick at, really.
Wow. Okay. And what is the elevator pitch for Potions: A Curious Tale, and how did the idea come about?
Yeah, so Potions: A Curious Tale is an adventure crafting game where combat's not always the answer. You play as this young witch named Luna who's discovered her ability to brew magical potions. And she can use these potions as spells to encounter monsters, overcome obstacles, and solve puzzles on her quest to become a potions master. And of course, the story is actually inspired by fairy tales and folklore from around the world, too. So it's a very worldly game. I came up with the idea for potions because I was a little frustrated about combat and progress in video games. It seems that you are rewarded so frequently in, action RPGs and action adventure games for just recklessly slaughtering everything to grind up experience and gold and other resources, which doesn't feel very heroic. So I wanted to find a way to design a game where players were a bit more cautious about combat without implementing, a karma system or a system that would feel very surface level, as in these are good things and these are bad things. I believe very much in like walking the middle path, and a lot of that requires nuance when you need something now, but you don't need it, once you've advanced in the future. And that's when I came up with the potion crafting system. There's no auto attack in the game. There are only two ways to defeat monsters. You can either run them into hazards and have them attack each other, or you can use your spells, use your potions to interact with them aggressively. But even that is sort of a puzzle in itself. To get the rarest ingredients, you have to know how to interact with them to get them to drop those special items.
Hmm, pretty in depth. And how did this idea come to you? I mean, I'm sure there was like a million and one games you could be making, and probably so many you've thought over the years. But how did this idea come to you, and you decided this is the one I've got to make?
It's almost accidental, actually. So as I was starting my career in the games industry, I had worked as both a server developer and as a producer within games, but I wasn't sure which direction I wanted to take my career. One of the other opportunities I saw potentially pursuing was being a game designer. However, I was not one of the people who grew up designing games on paper, so I didn't know if that was something I would enjoy. So I decided to design some games on paper, and one of those concepts was potions. I then was also trying to learn C++ at the time, and the potion crafting system seemed like a really good memory management heavy system to practice C++ and handling my own memory. So I decided to implement that, and was sort of getting an interesting feel for it when I went to Unite for the first time and heard about the Unity engine. And so I decided, well, I might as well turn this into a proper prototype. But there ended up being so much interest around the concept of the game that I kept expanding that prototype until I eventually decided to kickstart it. And here I am a decade later, finally publishing it.
Which kind of leads me to the next question, which was, what was it like in the beginning when you realized this wasn't just an idea, but this is a project you were actually going to engage in, put a lot of time into? What were the initial challenges, and how did you take them on?
Yeah, it was a little scary and a little hopeful. I think it's probably most scary after the Kickstarter got funded, because then I had an agreement with 1,200 people that I was going to provide them a game. Whereas before that, if it had failed, the only person I was really disappointed was myself, maybe some of my team members. Um, I I think that uh The biggest challenge there was, as I was driving towards the Kickstarter, I had done a bunch of research on how to have a successful Kickstarter. I actually took almost a year to prep the Kickstarter to ensure that I was going at it with the best approach possible. And then when it funded, it barely made its mark. I think I'd asked for 63,000 and I made 64 and a half. So, I barely funded in the last 15 minutes of the campaign, which means I got the bare minimum amount of money that I thought I needed to ship this game. Um, and it meant that there was no money left over to pay myself. Like I have not consumed a single penny from that Kickstarter money for myself. I've only used it for contractors and a demo laptop and a few other resources for the organization itself. And thus, I had both responsibility and not any like financial security for myself, which meant I needed to juggle paying for my rent, my own career, along with the development of this game, which is it's a lot. I mean, it's been all the looming pressure for almost my entire adult life now.
Yeah, I understand that. So part of that is you had to bring on a team and make this happen. So how did you assemble the team, and then how did you kind of inspire them to help keep this project going to the end?
Yeah, so working for such a long time, I've had a lot of different team members, and something else that I've pretty much always done is I've recruited people who are very early in their careers, if not at the start of their careers. So, I had a team member who was working at Walgreens while also working on my project. I had a team member who was working at a grocery store while working on my project. Um, and I found them through all sorts of different means. Some I found online through Reddit and the Unity forums. Some I found in the local Seattle game development community. Some I found through recommendations. Some of them were just actually my friends within the game development industry. Um, but I think one of the cool things, particularly about working with these early career people, is that I've seen them develop into professional game developers. I mean, obviously I paid them for their contributions, but seeing them go from doing contract work for me to working full time for Bungie and other studios has been really, really wonderful and inspiring.
Yeah, that's great. It's like you kind of help give them an inroad, and then you watch them grow further. Yeah, it's exciting. Um,
Absolutely.
and I know doing that, I mean, like if you outlined, that's kind of a long road. So from like your from idea inception to like actually you're about to go to market, like how long was that journey?
It was 9 years, 7 months.
Wow. I know people out there often imagine doing things like this. Oh, you just jump in and do it. Maybe it takes a few years, and I know that can be the case, but sometimes it takes a really long time, and it is what it is, right? And you just do what you got to do to make it happen. So in that regard, once you had some momentum going in this project, kind of in the early stages, like the Kickstarter and things are moving along, um, you get the money in hand, and now it's like you've got to get to the finish line. How did you capitalize and sustain the team? Was it just the Kickstarter funds, or was there more you had to do to keep the ball going? I mean, it's a long road, so
Yeah, so about half of the Kickstarter funds paid for about half the development, and the other half of the development I personally funded. Thankfully, I've been quite successful in my game development career, and particularly in my higher level leadership positions, I've been well compensated enough to be able to save a little money on the side to put back into the game itself.
that's great. And then, so there's the game, and part of that is, especially these days, it's which I assume you dove into when you were doing the Kickstarter initial stages. Is you need to have a community these days. It's not just the marketing and the PR like it used to be, but now there has to be a community, and you have to grow that. You have to support it and do the marketing and the PR. So tell us a little bit like what that was like, kind of found in the beginning, and then kind of throughout to where you are today.
Yeah, I'd certainly built my community initially before running the Kickstarter, but I didn't have a single platform for them to really rally around the game. Like I had a Facebook page and I had the Kickstarter page and I have a subreddit and some other things. It was only when I started up a Discord server for the community a couple years ago that I really started getting a community. And oh my goodness, they are just the most wonderful group of people. I feel so like blessed. They warm my heart that they exist because they're so kind. They're so supportive. They're so enthusiastic. They help me identify issues. They're very good at giving constructive feedback and helping each other. Like somebody had CSS questions last night, and other people were helping advise them because they're getting into web dev. It originally it was just a community around providing feedback and updates. I provide them updates, they provide me feedback around the game. But now it's actually a community. They socialize with each other about things that aren't even the game itself. And it's really great to have brought those people together. And I value them so much. They're really wonderful.
Yeah, and I think they'll as you launch and move forward, I'm no doubt they're going to help kind of keep the ball going, getting other people excited. Um, Speaking of that, do you have anything in mind about keeping them engaged post launch and ways to help them kind of grow and market and support the product?
Yeah, I don't wouldn't say I have a super specific plan, but absolutely I plan to keep engaging in that server, providing updates, talking through them with ideas. And then I am planning to do most likely a free DLC in addition to the console releases. And so I'll be working with them through that. So there'll be a lot of engagement and I'll probably be bouncing ideas off of them and asking them for their ideas as well.
So sort of along those lines too, were there any external individuals, organizations, or resources that were not on your team, but were critical or extremely helpful or inspiring that helped you kind of along the way?
I definitely had a lot of mentorship from various people within the games industry. Rami Ismail is one of my really good friends that I've leaned on. Jakob from Unbound Creations is another independent game developer who's had wonderful advice. I've definitely leaned into other game development communities. There's the How to Market a Game community. There is the Wholesome Games community. The and various subreddit communities as well have been great. As for other organizations, I've used the IGDA as communities. Obviously, I'm very closely connected with the IGDA, so that has been a great resource for me. I've been working with Stride PR to get assistance with PR and marketing. Um, yeah, and then I've worked with lots and lots of different communities and organizations around the promotion of the game itself. Women in Games International, WIGS, many, many different groups, Seattle Indies. They've all been really wonderful.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah.
So now, I mean, you're just about to launch. And from my experience, that doesn't mean things are over at all. It's like it's just really about to fire up, even though it's been such a long road. And here you are. It's like, oh my God, we're finally going to put this thing out here. But what challenges are in front of you now? And how do you see yourself taking them on?
Definitely launch marketing is one of the biggest challenges, and it's actually one of the scariest things. I
Right.
understand the benefit of having an embargo, but not knowing who is going to love and dislike your game before the embargo releases is kind of stressful. Um, I'm hoping everybody enjoys it, but I recognize that because it has a unique approach for combat, there are certain people who absolutely love the game, and then some people who just want to be spell slinging masters that do slaughter all of the local wildlife. So we'll see how that result comes out. Reaching out to influencers is wonderful and challenging. There's been so many tools created to help with that outreach, but it makes me feel like their inbox is constantly flooded. And so actually connecting with them has been much more difficult than it was even just 5 years ago. Um, I definitely think that as the one woman dev and community management team, I'm going to be really stressed around any hot fixes or bugs. I was actually dealing with a really very strange race condition issue around a game breaking progression part. That happens about 1 in 1,000 to 2,000
Oh no.
calls. So like 1 in 30 games run into this bug at all. And I've never been able to get logs for it. So there's part of me that's just stressed around that potentially showing up. Um, I think that having sustained community management, marketing, and development post-launch is just going to be an interesting juggle of prioritization, uh, as well as taking care of my own mental and physical health. I certainly have been crunching aggressively for the past 7 months, which is not healthy, and I don't recommend to anyone. But I've been really passionate about getting this game out the door. I've been full time on it for the last year, so I've luckily had the support and financial freedom in order to do that.
Mm. It's funny when you mention the once bug. I always think of it's the once bugs as it's just a bug we haven't figured out what the 100% case is to reproduce. But it's not
Yeah,
really
right.
once. It's just the one time you actually saw it because you happen to do those conditions. It's so
Exactly.
challenging to find those. But I think that's one of the benefits of today is that like it used to be back in the early console days. Once you launched it, that was it. Hands off. You
No
hope everything works out
patches.
great.
Yeah.
You just
Gold
wait.
disc.
Yep, but nowadays you can, it's okay. It's like if things go wrong, you do have an opportunity to go back in there, check some logs, hopefully that got updated and get things fixed. And I think part of what you pointed on with the community too, it's a lot of good folks because you're making a good product. It's a good-hearted product. It's good-hearted people connecting to it. And though even though there's other people that want something else, there's a lot of that something else out there for them. You're providing them something different, and I think that's exciting for a lot of people to get things that maybe not everybody else is addressing, and you're taking that opportunity to do that. So yeah, it's a long road and a lot to do and a lot coming forward, but I think what you're doing is great. um, and I know other people think like, well, I want to do that too, but not necessarily sure. I mean, they're listening to things like this and they can get a bit of a some inspiration, some hope, that maybe I could do this, right? And listen to what you have to say and people like you to maybe further that along. So with that, what advice or inspirational words would you give to anyone who is looking to follow in your footsteps?
Yeah. Prototype early, iterate often. If you are looking to bring on any team members, make sure that you have direction in mind and that you know what you're bringing them on to do. I think it can be very tempting to fill out your roster of team members before you actually have your vision really concrete. And I think that if you have the skills to prototype and you can really hone and refine that vision before bringing people on, it allows them to have a direction to sink their teeth into and tasks to set their sink their teeth into, whereas they might feel aimless if you bring them on too early. Uh, and you might say, "But I'm paying them anyway. Like they shouldn't feel bad." People do feel bad if they don't feel like they're being useful and productive. So it certainly helps them feel uh, that they are doing a good job as well. So that would be one of my recommendations as you're starting up a company and project. Um, the other one is to be gentle and understanding of yourself, particularly if you're trying to do this in your off hours, like if you're working a full-time job and managing game development on the side. Because if you hold yourself to too high of standards and then berate yourself for not meeting them, it's very easy to fall into a cycle of, you know, overwork, burnout, depression, until you eventually recover and then overwork and burn out again. Whereas if you take a proper pace, if you are gentle to yourself when you don't get as much work done because you're sick or you were busy or something happened, it actually allows you a lot more emotional bandwidth and mental freedom to be more productive and get more things done.
Yeah, I understand that too, and I think it's there's a tendency as founders, creators to just kind of like you have this vision and you're working so hard to make it get it come out to the world, and then yeah, it's easy to forget yourself in that process and your self-care, realizing that the rest of the world is probably just fine waiting. Like, take care of yourself, do what you got to do, and when it's ready, we're here. So
Absolutely.
it's a good reminder to self-care in that. It's very easy to get lost in the craziness of making something happen. um, so for the product itself, which you've been working so hard on for so long here, and it's like right there, it's about to come out. What do you want people to know about Potions of Curious Tale that you didn't already address? And how can people get the game and get involved with your community?
Yeah. So I think some of the compelling things about Potions include that it has tons of in-world puzzles. There's dozens and dozens, I think well over 50 puzzles in the game to solve of all different types. Which if you like, the puzzles in Zelda served games and push block puzzles, ice sliding puzzles, logic puzzles, secret puzzles, this is definitely a game for you. And if you are into fairy tales, myths, and folklore from any culture, I think you will find some really interesting characters, collectible cards with creatures on it as well. One of the main characters in the game is Baba Yaga from Slavic legend, but there's also Sun Wukong and a whole Journey to the West chapter. There's Snow White and the Seven Dwarves. There's Kitsune and Tanuki from Japanese lore. There's a lot of like rich culture in this game, and it's a really wonderful way to introduce kids to different folklore and cultures as well.
Oh, that's pretty neat. I didn't know about the side of like that. That makes total sense that kids that haven't been exposed to these things yet are getting an early introduction, and probably later will actually harken back to your product and say, "Oh, well, I've heard of this before. I've experienced that before, and I played that before. It was immersive. I was engaged in that story before." That could be pretty neat. Wow, you learned something new. Yeah, full
It's
disclosure, I did play the demo, and I loved it. It was super fun. So,
oh,
um,
awesome.
so
It's
but
really
I,
fun. It's really fun watching streamers when they get the quest, find the hut on chicken legs. Like you can see who has heard of Baba Yaga before and not, right? Because some of them are like,
yeah,
is that Baba Yaga? And some of them are like, hut on chicken legs. Like, what is this?
yeah, that was actually really funny. Okay, well, I mean, so those are my questions, and I really appreciate you taking some time to share your experience. I think that can be really helpful and really inspiring for people out there. Early Dan would have been inspired by it. So we hope to hear more from you in the future. We'll check back post launch and see how things are going and get a little update. But yeah, that's it for now. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, you bet, and good luck with the launch. I'll be watching.
Thank you.
Yeah, see you later.